I am going to introduce Kelly and Jacqui from the Glen for Women. And in this session, the Glen will be talking about culturally appropriate services for women and specifically about the opening of the Glen for Women. So I will leave you in these capable hands. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Kylie Cassidy from the Glen for Women. It's not Kelly. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of the Glen for Women. Before we get into talking about what our service is and where we are, I'd like to acknowledge that we are on the traditional lands of the Eora people, the Gadigal clan, and thank the spirits of the Gadigal clan for allowing us to be here today and bring good energy to this country. I'm a Wiradjuri woman from Central West New South Wales, and I'm lucky enough to live and work and have grown up on Darkinjung country on the New South Wales Central Coast. So I'll pass over to Jacqui to introduce herself, and then we'll get into what the Glen for Women is. And I'd also like to acknowledge and thank all of the speakers today. It's been really informative, and my mind's ticking over already about how I can utilise some of you wonderful ladies in our new service. So.
My name's Jacqui Kelly. It's a long title, so bear with me. I'm the Quality Improvement and Support Officer at the Glen and the Glen for Women. So my role is to, assist in developing a really good service. So just looking at our processes, our policies, our procedures, and make sure that, we're providing a really good service to our women, but as well as supporting the staff along the way as well.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I'll give you a bit of history about the Glen. The Glen's a drug and alcohol residential treatment facility currently based in Chittaway, and that's a men-only facility, and it's been operating for over 20 years now, since the early 90s, and it was established with some funding out of the Black Deaths in Custody to support Aboriginal men and stop them from going through the cycle of offending and going into the system. And, drug and alcohol was playing a huge part in that offending behaviour. So since the time that the Glen's grown, under the leadership or directorship of the amazing Aboriginal women that are on the board, 5 Aboriginal elders from our local area, they've always noted that we need to have a female-specific service. So whilst the Glen is Aboriginal community controlled, we don't discriminate against anybody and any nationality, and we open our doors to everybody. It is a 12-week residential rehab program. However, our funding doesn't mean that after the end of 12 weeks you have to go. So we base our care holistically on a person's need, and if they need to stay longer, we accommodate that. And we also currently have transition housing at the men's facility, and we're working on female transition housing for our new facility. So we've just finished construction. The seed was planted by those aunties many years ago, and then the lobbying began not long after that, and it's been a long process with a lot of community consultation, a lot of involvement and planning, right down from even our male clients have been a part of that process, and our local Aboriginal community, our elders, local stakeholders, and then we formed an operations committee that got to work on how this was going to look and why it's so important. We conducted a feasibility study. Out of that study, we realised how much more complex the mental health and trauma is for women that are in addiction. So we've really taken a lot of that on board and sort of starting to partner with key stakeholders to help support some of those health needs there. The funding was announced by the federal government in 2019, and we were lucky enough to now build a 20-bed female-specific drug and alcohol rehab centre on the New South Wales Central Coast.
Yeah.
So do you want to talk a bit about our model of care and how we operate?
Yeah, so the model of care that we'll be using in the program is the ADAN. It's called the ADAN model of care, and that's the Aboriginal, ADAN.
Drug and alcohol
residential
rehabilitation network.
So the network is made up of other Aboriginal community-controlled residential rehabs that are in New South Wales. So they make up this network. And over the years, it's taken a couple of years for the network to get together with the Aboriginal Health and Medical Research Council and other Aboriginal services and the community and clients came together and put together a model of care, which has 9 core elements to the model of care. I don't know if I can remember all of them, but what's at the centre of our model of care and what's different with our model of care as opposed to like mainstream Western-based residential rehab is that culture is at the centre of healing. So we deliver a model of care that's just centred on connection to community, connection to country, and connection to spirit. So just being connected with the wider community and culture. So embedded in our program, in all the different components of our program, whether that be case management, living skills, the counselling that we have, it's all related to somehow being connected to culture, community, and to country. So when we're looking at a client, we'll be looking at their connections. We'll ask them, where are you from? Where's your mob from? And helping that client identify with where they've come from. So for a lot of addiction can be centred around people feeling really disconnected. They have this gaping wound or this gaping hole that they're feeling, and they're trying to fill that up with drugs, alcohol, gambling or whatever. So part of the recovery process is facilitating and helping the client become more connected with their culture, with their community, with their families. So there's a range of different elements to our model of care, but largely it's centred around culture and being connected with community and culture.
Yeah. And then I guess the other aspects that are prominent within that model of care is that it's very client-centred. We work with our clients, but we work to a point where they case manage themselves and they're driving their own journey. And like I said, if they need that longer time, we allow for that. We build a lot of relationships and links in community as well, so that once our clients leave the centre, they're not just left. We establish that exit plan from day one of their arrival and work on getting them, safe homes to return to, housing support, education, training throughout the time in the program, and employment. So we build networks and relationships with all kinds of stakeholders in the local area and also in the areas that many of the clients come from. So we take people from 18 up all around the country. So it doesn't matter where you reside. Our outreach team will build relationships with services and support networks in your own community if you're choosing to relocate back to where you came from. The centre is based on the Central Coast, and we do give priority to the local community, but we've had, for example, from the Glen for Men, we've had people come from overseas at times that wanted that particular style of treatment. So we don't, like I said, don't discriminate against anyone or where they come from. And the story, I guess, behind that is Auntie Jan, the lady on the board, one of our board members, her sons were living actively in addiction, and she said that, at any one time, if her son's friends, because he didn't have any brothers, if any one time that they sought treatment, they were non-Aboriginal, she would not be able to say no to them. They're his brothers. It doesn't matter what colour they are. So she made it a very big point to the board and the rest of the Glen family, as we say we are, that we would never discriminate against anybody who was seeking treatment.
And just on that, I see a lot of I've worked in a range of different rehabilitation settings, and I see in this particular program the non-Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander client engaging in cultural activities, and you just see their spirit come alive. You see the connection within them and how that seems to be a little bit of a missing piece in some of more the sort of traditional mainstream Western-based type of residential treatment centres. So you just, when you see them participating in artefact making, like clapstick making or art, or we do celebratory dance as well. So you see them getting made up and doing these dances. It's just, you just see them so become alive, and I really feel that that's kind of a bit of a missing piece
definitely.
in some people's recovery. So it works it just works well for a lot of people. So the culture part is just such an important part for Aboriginal Torres Strait Island people, but I think for non-people too. Being able to provide a space for a program that has that culture is really important. The statistics say that Aboriginal people in mainstream rehabs have a very low retention rate. They drop out really quickly, and they're disproportionately low in completing program as well. But that's a different case in Aboriginal community controlled program. The stats are a lot better there because there is that connection to culture. We've got elders and we've got community leaders coming in who are mentoring the clients. So they've got that instant connection with the local community. And that continues after program too. We've got the outreach program that we'll have with the women as well, that just continue that, and we have the clients coming in to do groups as well, and just continue that relationship.
Yeah, and I guess that outreach program stemmed as a result of COVID. So during COVID, we found that a lot of other drug and alcohol treatment facilities were closing their doors and the residents were going home because of the risks and the health risks, and they were unable to manage that. We chose not to close our doors, and we continued our intake process. We just put some really strict screening processes around COVID, and we got some demountable buildings on site and created our own ISO space and stuff like that. And we continued that process, and we found that the numbers for our intake were, we were getting a bit inundated throughout that time for these people that were having to go home. So that's how outreach was born, and our case management team started doing outreach calls and checking in on people and giving them case management type care and linking them to support services in the community whilst they were waiting to come into the Glen, and the Glen for Women will be the same. But as part of that process, it allowed for us to have Zoom meetings with the guys in outreach and zooming into the clients that were currently in the rehab, and it broke down this whole set of barriers about when you come through the door not knowing anyone. So it's a huge thing to step into that space and finally face yourself to. You're coming in at the lowest point in your life, and you've hit rock bottom, and then you're coming into this place where everyone loves you and loves you back to life. It's a big, challenging experience. So we found that COVID was positive for us in that way. And we're really excited to start doing this kind of work with our women, and the intake process is almost about ready to start in April, and then our first lot of clients will be coming towards the end of April, early May. And all of the information is on the Glen website, theglen.org.au, and it also outlines a little bit of our process, and there's some clips there as well, and we've got clips and updates on the socials. But I think Jacqui and I have been working a long time since sort of the Glen for Women solely, I guess, since towards the end of last year together, and at the same time watching the construction happen, and it's been a really exciting process. But I guess a lot of that honesty of the Glen program and allowing people to, like we talked before about sharing information about the periods, it made me reflect on our model of care, because we are an honest program. There's nothing that you can say that's unheard of, and we encourage the clients who've had survival skills that are not always in honesty to be able to come along and really change that cycle and break some barriers and learn to be in their own truth, whether, like Jacqui said, whether you're Aboriginal or non-Aboriginal, that model of care works, and it just connects you to yourself, connects to your own identity. And we've been lucky enough to watch the journey of the men and see how many lives have changed, but we're really excited to just build that sisterhood of women who are entering care. And we know that a lot of the partners or brothers, uncles, whatever, are getting well, but there's always mum or auntie or the partner at home that's still unwell, because they're the nurturer and the provider for the children and things like that. So we've allowed for a kinship coordinator to work over both sites now to help those families where mum is seeking treatment, and it might be auntie or nan or whoever has kids at home, to make sure that family network is well supported so that it can give mum the space to seek treatment. Also, if there's an involvement with DCJs, their sole role will be to build relationships and networks with DCJs and help continue with access visits and hopefully start restoration processes as well for families, and start putting families back together.
Yeah, so I think for the women, the women's pathway into treatment is often different to the men. So women seem to come in with more complex stuff because they're holding it together for a little bit longer than what usually the women are the primary carers of children. So they're working hard to care for the children, but they've got this addiction and they're struggling. And by the time they're reaching out for help, they're pretty complicated. You know, there's often DCJ are knocking on their door going, what is going on? So there's those pressures going on, plus a whole range of other things. So we will be getting a lot of women with a lot of complicated issues and needs coming through. So we have got a really good team. We've just gone through this massive recruitment. We had like over 150 applicants, for 8
across
positions across 4 roles.
We've had a massive few weeks.
So having to kind of cull that and then get the interviews and the group interviews together. But we've sort of put together an amazing team.
Yeah, really strong.
With really broad
women,
skills and backgrounds that I'm really confident and really excited to see that they'll be able to meet the needs of the women coming in.
Yeah.
So that's been a really interesting process too. So it's been a really interesting process from the seed that's been planted when Auntie Coral said we need a women's rehab to where we are now. It's been a very interesting process, but yeah. So it's going to be very exciting.
And I guess where I'm thinking about how some of the services and supports out there in the garden today can work with us, because when our clients arrive at the Glen for Women, we don't just treat the drug and alcohol. We think that's just a band-aid solution. We treat what's happening and what's led to that drug and alcohol. So we start unpacking the trauma that's led to that addiction. We also look at their physical health, full health checks, full screens, all your female and sexual health checks. Dental, we understand that it's a real shame thing for a lot of our people in addiction to not have your teeth and stuff like that, but also all the health implications that come with having bad teeth. So there's some of the first things that we look at, your eye health, and then we also address their ID, getting their birth certificates, Medicare, MyGov accounts. Some people have arrived on our doors and they've never held ID in their life and they're 30, 40 years old. So it's like they've just been trapped in this survival mode for so long that we start addressing all those different needs. And once those things, you know, getting the teeth fixed and getting the birth certificate, getting the Medicare, you start to see this person really grow and just feel really good and empowered about themselves with small things that we take for granted. So I'm looking at all the services out there today and collecting all the information, and we will be in touch.
Yeah, I love it. There's this theme that people have been talking about, don't let the abnormal become normal, and I really like that, because I think some women, you know, slowly over time with addiction, it does feel like it's normal, but it's it doesn't have to be that way. So we're trying to break that cycle of what might seem normal to someone and break it and facilitate and insist in something different.
Yeah, definitely. Some of the other ways we break that cycle is we're very active in community-based rehab, and we've copped mixed feelings about that being an all-female facility, because a lot of facilities out there are more refuge type and locked away from community due to some of those, I guess, more vulnerable situations that women face. But we've chosen to remain similar to what the Glen do now and still get very actively involved in community, have local sporting teams, do lots of like forestry cleanups and things like that we're already involved in, and have our women be empowered and not feel vulnerable and have to lock away, even those women that have been through domestic violence and things like that. So in saying that, our security is quite different to the security at the Glen for Men Centre, and we've allowed, you know, there's more cameras on site, a little bit more security around the property itself, but we've also allowed for more vulnerable women with active AVOs to have a personal duress on them. At any one time, they can have a back-to-base system that if the perpetrator was to turn up on site, and the I guess, calibre of the women that we've employed, we're quite confident that we've got a good, strong network of women that will be very protective and help provide that safe space.
But I think, like Kylie said, like we really want our women to be connected with their community. Yeah. We don't want to shut them away. We want them, you know, out there. So within, you know, making sure we've got safety controls in place to keep them safe. And we know we're building really strong relationships with other women's drug and alcohol services who may be able to provide safety for the women that really need that level of safety as well. So, we're working hard at building relationships with other women's drug and alcohol residential services on the coast and in the city here. But we really want our women to be out there in the community, just because addiction can just shut people off from that. So we want to break down those walls and have our women out there and, getting amongst the community. Yeah. Are we over time? Are we getting them later?
Yeah, there's lots of layers, I guess, to the program. So it's really body, mind, spirit. So we look at your health, we look at your body, the cultural stuff addresses that spiritual need, but we also have meditation, yoga, things like that, personal training, healthy diet. Another thing we deliberately don't do is employ a cook. We do purposeful life skills, and as part of that program, our women are learn to cook with the guidance of a professional chef, but we also have a nutritional program that a local company comes in and teaches all about nutrition and healthy meals that you can then take home and feed your family. And some ladies don't have any cooking skills, and the same with our men, they've never had to cook. Just learning all those life skills that you would take home. We were conscious in the build as well that we didn't make it commercial at all. It's one big house with 20 bedrooms. So it's just a big house. And we basically live there with our clients. We're there 24/7. There's always somebody there. Throughout the day, the team's a lot more people on hand, and then overnight you have your overnight shift. But washing machines are the same as what you'd use at home. The ovens in the kitchen are the same, the fridge. The only thing I would say is different is the cool room in the freezer's a bit larger. But we're just conscious of making a home more than, a commercial style building.
Try and stay away from the hospital clinic look, but more like a home feel, because that's been in the feasibility study. That was what was recognised as well, to make it look as as comfortable as possible. So the whole build was a community effort. Like the architecture was there, and she was slowly getting pushed to the side with her ideas. It was all the community was going, we need this and we need that, we need that, we need that. Even the men from the Glen Centre was putting in some of their input as well. So it really has been a community effort, getting the program up and running. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I just would like to say thank you to you both so much. That was so inspiring and heartening to just sort of hear about the incredible work that you're doing, and I can only imagine the impact that it has on the people who are lucky enough to be part of the Glen. So thank you both so much for your time.
No worries.
Now we actually are going to have a 10-minute break now before our next speaker comes on.